Welcome back to the weekly podcast. If you've never been here before, welcome to the weekly podcast for the first time. I'm your friendly commentator, Brandon Strong. You might have known or might not have. And, I'm just a normal, everyday person. Just can't understand why we're still in the situation that we're in with prohibition and people going to jail for this shit. People wanting to put other people in jail for this shit. I've come up with a little theory. It's not really the people. It's not weed that they hate. The prohibitionists, but it's the people that smoke it. And by and large, these prohibitionists just there's this thing in this world, and you know how I know this? It's because of the piss test thing. It's like a piss test really is only designed to see if you smoke weed or not. So the ultimate test in life isn't whether you become a drug addict or do drugs or do alcohol or do this drug or that drug. It's if you smoke weed or not. It's like some big fucking test that everybody has to take. And if you want to do this kind of shit in life over here, which is associated with being a winner and getting a good job and getting into politics or going to become a preacher or something, or a teacher, being in the military. So if you want to do any of those things, the test is really not physical or mental or any of that shit. It's just whether or not you smoke weed. And the people that don't smoke weed, they fucking hate you if you smoke weed. It's not about the weed, it's about that choice you made. And it's really not about the fact that you made the choice you made. It's about the fact that they made the choice they made even though they might not have wanted to make that choice. And they feel some animosity about that even being a thing. Or they just don't like people that smoke weed. And let's face it. They act higher and mightier and holier than thou if they don't smoke weed. That's part of the fucking not smoking weed thing. Like, you're allowed to look down on others and act like they're losers because they smoke weed. Even if you're like Chris Christie and you get your stomach sewn together and you still can't seem to control yourself as far as eating goes. But somehow smoking weed's bad. Alcoholics, same thing. Always pointing down at weed smokers. Cigarette fucking smokers, for Christ's sakes. It really doesn't matter who you are. You got to axe to grind with someone that smokes weed. If you, in life, was at that crossroad at one time or another where they're like, well, if you want to do the next thing, we got to know whether or not you smoke weed. So here, piss in this cup. And you had to make sure you were clean so you just didn't smoke weed because you just don't smoke weed. Alright, enough talk about this shit. I'm just a regular person. I'm not a news person. This isn't a news channel. Although I do talk about what's going on in current events with cannabis because that's kind of my whole thing. I like to keep up on this shit. And I got a few people that I read that are regulars that I'll probably be reading from here. I'm sure I will. And there's things that they have a certain insight on, just like I might because I look into this shit more than somebody that might be watching me. And the fact is somebody like a Tom Angel or a Russ Bellevue, Radical Russ. Those people their noses have been to this grindstone for a long time. As far as writing and speaking on these issues. So big props to those two guys, as always. And if nothing else, even if they don't write the actual stories I'm reading to you, it was a tweet or an influence that they gave me that made me even look into the shit. Because, you know, I used to like Google marijuana news or something to get all my stories, and then eventually, you know, just following those guys on Twitter, it's basically like that's my guide. You know, they're the ones that have their ear to the ground, and if all you do is watch me and you really want to know about everything that's going on, you really need to tap into their fountain of constant stories and viewpoints. So big props to those guys, as always. I don't know what they think of me or if they even think of me, so, you know, every once in a while they'll bump into me on Twitter, and we'll talk about something for like one tweet. It's whatever, man. If you want to know the truth, it's a lonely world to be a person that commentator or on YouTube. Like if I wanted to be a commentator on like atheism or politics in general, like other things in politics that are more popular things to talk about, I'd probably have a lot more subscribers and my videos would get a lot more views and all that shit. Being involved in this sector of the commentator market is it's a lonely place, man. First of all, there ain't a whole lot of people that even have any YouTube channel dedicated to talking about weed news. I find a lot of people talking about, you know, they got their industry talking point stuff like new strains or trying new products, whatever. I'm talking about what's going on in the news, and let's do it. Today's episode kind of, to me, you know, you might as well theme this one Jeff Sessions and others that just are losing the battles one after another. They're essentially, we're going to see Sessions lash out because time and time again he has these ideas that he's going to do this or do that, and it all backfires on him. Will he ever get anything done? Is he trying to really do this? Is he really serious about this? So, Seattle Times, they're saying, hey, Sessions, the Prohibition era is done. Feds don't have the resources to take on a majority of the country. U.S. Attorney Jeff Sessions is an old-school drug warrior, so it came as no surprise that his Department of Justice recently sent Washington and other states with legalized marijuana letters with a fusillade of bullet points on the dangers of legal weed. And I thought about pulling the letter up and looking at it and looking at those bullet points, but they're going to kind of like tell you that they're full of shit. And this isn't the only place they told them that. So you had Seattle, and then you had Oregon and Washington. Also, Alaska was one of the states that he sent a letter to, and they basically barked back at him. So, what is surprising, however, is how misleading and cherry-picked his data was. Sessions wrongly portrayed Washington's marijuana experiment as a circus with exploding marijuana extraction labs and stone teens weaving across the roadway. The experiment is a work in progress, but Sessions' letter to the Governor Jay Inslee warrants a rebuttal, not just because of the bad data. It missed the fundamental point made by voters in Washington and Colorado in the historic 2012 election. It had subsequently been made in California, Oregon, Alaska, Massachusetts, Nevada, and Maine. Legalization is spreading because it's a rational response to the failed policy of prohibition. Arresting and incarcerating marijuana users and growers doesn't make them go away, it drives them underground. Prohibition had a very vastly disproportionate impact on black men. Maintaining the ban was a draw on law enforcement resources. A legalized, regulated market creates a tax source to pay for treatment and teen prevention campaigns. And what they never say is, and it also is going to, reduce actual marijuana crimes. Although a lot of times we see the evidence isn't really showing that. But overall, like in a place like Colorado where recreational is legalized, by and large, marijuana crimes have gone down, and people just simply aren't having to get spent the massive amount of resources that was being spent before in the investigation, arrest, prosecution, jail, housing, all this shit, public defender costs, all this for someone for a marijuana crime. So they're saving a lot of money there, and they never mention that in their little bullet list of things that look at all the good things that happened. Inslee and Attorney General Bob Ferguson, in a letter to Sessions this week, rebutted his litany of problems, which included Washington-grown marijuana being found in 43 other states. Ooh, I live in Michigan, and I know we have our own little weed thing going here, but Washington weed's just not something that you hear about showing up in other states. Maybe it does, maybe on the DL or whatever, but it's not. Like 43 other states, it sounds, even California, man, come on. That's most of the other states. Like, you take the state they're talking about, so add one more to that, 44. So there's only 6 states somehow that this Washington weed ain't making it to. Anyway, an increase in stoned drivers and 17 marijuana labs exploding in 2014 alone. Now, I remember the stoned driver thing. I just kind of did look at that bullet list or whatever, and it had like this 45% increase over the years where it wasn't legalized to where it was in stone driving something or other, fatalities or crashes. I'm not even sure what they're talking about there. Stone driving tickets, who knows? But I think the numbers were inflated. I don't know what they were even using for data. As Inslee and Ferguson accurately note, the data was gathered before Washington's first licensed and regulated marijuana store opened in 2015. Sessions' data, in fact, comes from the Prohibition era he apparently favors. Since Washington began fully regulating marijuana, state inspectors have cracked down on state stores that sold to minors. They required licensed growers to track every ounce of legal weed. Since those state licensed stores opened, the annual State Health Youth Survey of Washington students found that the number of current underage users is actually down among younger students and virtually flat for high school seniors. All groups say it has become slightly harder to get. That's because you need to be 18, actually 21 and over to get it. So it's kind of like an alcohol thing. And maybe people that aren't, they're between 18 and 21 probably have an easier time of getting it than someone that's under 18. We'll say that. It's just the way it is with alcohol, too. People aren't willing to provide alcohol to a minor if the minor is like 14 years old. It starts looking a little bit crazy. Anyway, that's not to say legalization is without challenges, including the normalization of underage pot use. The answer is prevention education, which is paid for with some of the $730 million in state marijuana taxes and fees projected for the next 2 years. In his letter, Sessions rattled the sword of prohibition, but did not say the feds were coming to end the legalization experiment. And for a good reason. The feds don't have the resources to take on a majority of the country, as you'll find out more about later in the show. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans now live in a state where there is legal recreational marijuana. 3 out of 5 live in states with legal medical marijuana access. These numbers are growing. The Prohibition era is done, whether Sessions wants to admit it or not. And that was a Seattle Times op-ed by the Seattle Times editorial board. They don't usually chime in on political issues unless it's just to the point where it's like, okay, what in the actual F is going on here? This guy is obviously he bumped his head and it's still 1950. I don't know. Whatever, man. Sessions, I think this whole heap of shit you have about marijuana is about to get stepped on one last time after this. This isn't it. It's not over yet, guys. He's not done trying. You better believe it. There's no way he's done trying, because this is the guy's only mission. And I've heard other people talk about this, and it's not just Jeff Sessions. All right, it's when you get Republicans in there, they're always going to try to push more prohibition when they got any kind of amount of federal power. All right, when they only have the Congress and they didn't have the White House or the Senate, they still was trying to push more prohibition shit around. There wasn't that, you didn't have Rand Paul out there talking about legalization, because basically you wouldn't have had no allies at the time. But now that they got the president, they got the Congress, they got the Senate, they got freaking governors everywhere, and the state governments are run by Republicans everywhere. Now that that's going on, it seems like, they're a little bit more adamant to try to push this agenda. Because as we know, marijuana, cannabis, hemp, all of it is industry that would crush a lot of these big industries that lobby the government all the time. They got some of the biggest lobbies there is. You got the big pharma, huge lobby. Big agra, huge lobby. Big whatever you can make hemp into, everything. All those lobbies. And those lobbies started with people that were like making dynamite and stuff like that. They're like, we can make this shit out of this synthetic shit we just invented. So, we're talking about chemical companies. We're talking about everything in the medicinal world. Everybody feels threatened by this, and they all have Republicans in their back pocket. So, of course, Jeff Sessions is a good face for the front of that. And he also has ties to some prison lobby donation money. There's other things in his open secrets file that you might be able to connect the dots between that and, the demand for him to be in this position he's in. But when it comes down to it, this is just an old-time white boy from Alabama with a fucking penchant for, prohibition of marijuana. To him, that's like a no-brainer. Like, of course you have people going to prison for marijuana use. This guy is like, he's dark when it comes to marijuana. And he's in the dark when it comes to facts. So I think he's got to be embarrassed big time, where it's just like, like a big, like everybody's just laughing at him. This is almost that moment right here. So Oregon just punked Jeff Sessions for citing bogus studies. And I believe it was the high-intensity drug trafficking study from Colorado that was one of the things he was using. And constantly, him and others, like Kevin Sabat, it's like the Prohibitionist Manifesto or something. I've looked at the data and then looked at their summaries. The summaries don't even line up with the data. It's the whole thing is just kind of like contrived. It was like designed to tell a story. And the Rocky Mountain thing that they're always using is garbage, man. If you really want to know real numbers, all you got to do is go grab the numbers that they keep track of in the states that it's legalized. And Colorado has some really good record keeping of things like teen use and, hospital and CDC calls related to cannabis, overdosing, whatever you want to name it, whatever name you want to put on eating too many nanograms of marijuana, not marijuana, but THC, too many, tenths of a gram. Next thing you know, you're couched really bad. Do you call CDC? No, you don't. And that number is going down because, like I've said before, they're educating the public about that. And part of that education process is to let people know that it is non-toxic. And I harken back to the day when like eating a brownie would annihilate me like that. It'd probably do it nowadays. I don't really eat cannabis as much as I used to. So anyway, last spring, a leaked report from the Oregon State Police gave marijuana legalization advocates a chill and drug warriors like Jeff Sessions a boost. The state system for tracking legally grown recreational marijuana were an abysmal failure, the report said, with huge quantities of cannabis products in the state funneling out to black market dealers in states that hadn't yet legalized the crop. Even under prior attorney generals who don't share Sessions' ardent retrograde views on pot, this was trouble. Such interstate trafficking problems are one of the few surefire ways to get the federal government to crack down on your legalization experiment under existing Department of Justice guidelines, commonly referred to as the Cole Memorandum. Sessions pounced, though not with the alacrity observers had expected. In a July 24 letter to Governor Kate Brown, Democrat, Sessions cited the state troopers' report in detail and laid groundwork for federal intercession into the state's blooming legal pot trade. The long-deferred legal showdown over conflicting federal and state laws on the drug seemed nigh. There's just one snag. The report was bogus. The Oregon State Police determined that the draft report required significant additional work and revision because the data was inaccurate and heavily extrapolated conclusions were incorrect. Kind of like what I said about the Rocky Mountain Boy. Brown wrote in a reply to Sessions on Tuesday, "I would draw your attention to the sources relied upon in the document, which include an assortment of random blog and newspaper articles that should hardly form a basis of an informed policy decision." Brown points out that Oregon's legal market actually only came online that same month, governed by the same kind of high-tech seed-to-sale tracking systems present in other states, keen to stay on D.C.'s good side. She notes that the state's older medical pot system was moved onto that same intense tracking regimen in May. When Brown's explanation of Sessions' error in latching onto Falt's report is gentle and patient, the previous correspondence she attaches to the Oregon State Police Superintendent Travis Hampton is blunt. Hampton's staff attempted to make it clear the document was not accurate, not validated, outdated, and the Oregon State Police did not endorse the conclusions in the draft. When it first leaked to the press in March, he wrote Sessions on August 16th. Unfortunately, quote, "Unfortunately, you sourced the same leaked draft document as evidence against Oregon's marijuana regulatory structure." And then you start to wonder, is this guy just like, did he just change his mind at the last minute? Or, this is a police guy that's talking about, well, this is a leaked memo, and we were just kind of like, basically what happens is somebody writes a report, and then they send it around the circle, and people hammer at, it's like they take their hammer and chisel, and everybody gets to pound away at it. That's what I see it as. Maybe the first draft was pretty, primitive. And especially with the data that they're talking about. We'll get into that a little bit more, I think. Sessions either hadn't noticed for 5 months that the information he based his threats to Oregon on was already disavowed by its law enforcement authors, or willfully cherry-picked a damaged slate of falsehoods to create a toehold to interfere with Oregon's marketplace. Oregon is the third legalization state to call out Sessions since his initial round of eerie letters went out this spring. Washington and Alaska officials levied similar responses a week earlier. Both states, quote, "Both states note that the data Sessions utilize when discussing their states' respective regulatory regimes is out of date and incomplete," the cannabis reported after obtaining copies of the letters. Colorado officials have not yet replied. Getting triple roasted on this dishonest portrayal of state regulatory systems won't necessarily stop Sessions from sending in the cavalry, like I said. He has long been impervious to facts about marijuana, exaggerating the drug's dangers and refusing to entertain the growing body of evidence that it is more effective and less harmful pain remedy than the heroin-like pharmaceuticals marketed to doctors and patients for the past 3 decades. Sessions says his policy decisions on marijuana are being guided by a secretive task force he created to study various criminal enforcement issues. The group was expected to make its recommendations both to Sessions and to the public in late July. I have made videos about everything that you're hearing here. Like, I've been kind of following this Sessions shit pretty close, so if you're new to this channel, look back in my past videos that I made this year specifically, because ever since Sessions got on board, it's been one thing like this after another. And, you know, I've been making videos as some of the more pertinent things have happened. Like, I didn't make a video every time Sessions' name popped up in the news, even when it was about marijuana. But, you know, let's just say when it does pop up about marijuana, it's usually something I want to make a video about. So no such report was ever published. Sessions did not tout the group's finding. A few reporters who obtained but did not release draft versions of the recommendations said they largely continue the Obama-era policy of non-interference with legal state markets that do not violate the Cole Memo. If that is indeed the counsel Sessions received from the group, he is likely disappointed. With legalization on the march during his Senate tenure, Sessions used Judiciary Committee hearings on pot prohibition to decry that good people don't smoke marijuana. During his national speaking tour as the nation's top cop, he repeatedly rebuked legalization experiments and mocked the idea that pot could be a valuable tool in the campaign against opioid addiction. Not to mention, said he was very dubious of it being medical marijuana. We'll just say very dubious of medical marijuana. As in, even if it is medicine, he's basically thinking everybody just smokes it to get high. Well, doesn't that also just make it medicine, especially if getting high feels good? And especially if the getting high isn't a really big deal. I mean, it isn't like a heroin situation here. All right, if the numbers don't lie, legal recreational adult use cannabis is already a multi-billion-dollar industry, even with less than 10% of the U.S. population currently living in states with an operational marketplace. Let's not forget, the other 90% of people that live in places where recreational marijuana is not legal, people that aren't medical marijuana, and then there's states where everything's just completely illegal. All those places still have marijuana. That's the funny thing. And all the people that would smoke marijuana in those places, whether it was legal, if it was legal, well, they do whether it's legal or not, all right? Like, I was just in Missouri, and somebody was from Oregon was playing music to them on the stage, and they were like, I think it was Oregon, maybe it was, she might have been from Seattle, but one of those states where it's legal. Anyway, the point was, she's talking about marijuana, and she was like, you guys don't even have any kind of legalized marijuana out here, do you? And somebody in the crowd was just like, yeah, we're outlaws out here. And, I mean, that's part of the element of smoking weed and being in the whole, I don't know, it's like it's kind of like this feeling that is a stereotype too, but it's real, you know. It's like you feel kind of like there's this element to being a user of marijuana that feels like you're fucking an outlaw. And especially in a place like Missouri where you can go to jail for just having a few grams, you can get a felony for 34 or 33 grams. So, legalization states have seen huge tax revenues with significant job growth from pot, began cashing in large savings from reduced criminal justice system spending, thank you for mentioning that, and watch the black markets in their states shrink precipitously. And the early returns from legalization have already caught the attention of other states. By the end of 2018, the share of American populace living in states where buying and selling pot is legal and closely regulated will have more than doubled. And one more story about Sessions. A bipartisan group of lawmakers tell Sessions to stop blocking marijuana research. Please. Bipartisan group of members of Congress is asking the U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions to stop standing in the way of increased research into marijuana's medical potential. Quote, over 80% of Americans believe that doctor-prescribed marijuana should be legal according to recent polls. And this number hasn't been below 70 in about 5 years. Like, what in the fuck, man? Usually you would think the government would be a little bit more in touch with the population, but time and time again we're seeing evidence that there's almost zero connect between public opinion and actual politicians acting on policy or even going anywhere near the public's where the public's at. And this is issue after issue. This isn't just cannabis, and that's why the Democratic Party especially is really suffering, because if you ask them where they stand on an issue, they're usually like, well, I can't really say. We got to wait until the donors let us know. And then when they tell us it's not going to be anything you want to hear, so we got to make up some kind of a platitude that sounds good for everyone. And, you know, that's fucking what's been killing me about the Democratic Party my whole life, to be honest, you know. This is written by Tom Angel, by the way. But yeah, like, overall, I have been let down by Democrats on every issue, including marijuana, every time I fucking voted for them. It's not like the Republicans were ever any better. They're always worse. They're the prohibitionists. But what the hell has anybody done? Bill Clinton didn't do a fucking thing. Neither did Obama. Well, Obama, I give him credit for letting this Cole memo thing happen, but do you see his fucking name on it anywhere? No. And I was going to do a pardon report and a clemency report on Obama, but as I researched it, I started seeing some really bad things, some shit that you would see if it was George W. Bush that was doing the pardoning, or fucking Ronald Reagan, or George H.W. Bush. This shit is like, it doesn't matter who you think these guys are. I mean, they're not your friends. The Democrats or the Republicans. If you're for legalizing marijuana, they're not your friends. Any other issue that polls in the public over 60%, like universal health care, that's a big... I mean, that polls over 50% among Republicans now. And then you got politicians like, again, Democrats, by and large, won't even tell you that whether or not they're for something like that. I mean, you're running for office. You need people to vote for you. Why can't you stand for anything? And I mean, I guess when your campaign slogan is basically like, oh, look at the other guys. They're fucking bad. They're really bad. You don't want to fuck with that shit. We're never going to get anything done like this, guys. So it's ballot initiatives, I guess. And we just seen a crossover on medical marijuana last year where more marijuana has been legalized for medicinal purposes via ballot amendment via legislation rather than ballot initiatives by the public. That's not good. You know why that's not good? Because that's how you get shit like Florida and Maryland and all that shit. I don't know if Maryland was a initiative, the ballot initiative type thing, because it was so fucking long ago, I don't remember. How about that? It's been taking like the longest ever for this rollout to happen, and I don't think it's gonna happen. New Jersey, same shit. But what you really get is people like, you get Florida or Arkansas, where the regulations are just so ridiculous that the black market's going to be there for a long time, especially when it comes to smokable bud. So over 80% of Americans living with prescribed marijuana. It is worrisome to think that the Department of Justice, the cornerstone of the American civil society, would limit new and potentially groundbreaking research simply because it does not want to follow a rule. The letter references a story the Washington Post published last week reporting that the Justice Department has prevented the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, from even acting on applications from researchers who want to grow cannabis for scientific studies under the new program. Here we go again. Alphabet soup is never going to work out. We're never going to get this right. It's a plant that can grow anywhere and become a commodity. And that's something that they just cannot have out there. That's the one reason why cannabis is always going to be some kind of thing you can go to jail for. That's it, man. Just because it can grow anywhere, just about anybody can grow it, and it's a commodity. They need slaves, man. They don't need people to be able to do their own thing. Last August, on the same day the DEA denied petitions to reschedule marijuana under the Controlled Substances Act, the agency also established a new procedure to license more facilities to cultivate marijuana for research, but they never did. And that was also the first video I made for this channel, is when all that shit happened last August. The move was in response to concerns about the lack of quality of marijuana available for trials. I also did a video about that. The garbage looks like parsley. Come on, man. You can do better. We can test what we already know is medical marijuana. The only legal U.S. source of cannabis since 1968 has been a farm at the University of Mississippi, which is licensed by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Researchers have often argued that it is difficult to obtain product from the university, and even when their applications are approved, it's often of poor quality. However, despite the fact that the DEA already has received at least 25 applications to participants in the newly expanded licensing program, it has not acted on any of them. And that, according to the Post, is because top officials in the Department of Justice are impeding the proposals from advancing. Quote, they're sitting on it, an unnamed law enforcement official told the newspaper. They're sitting on it. They just will not act on these things. Separate DEA insider said the Justice Department has effectively shut down this program to increase research registrations. In the new letter, Representative Matt Getz from Florida, Republican, Dana Rohrabacher, Republican from California, Jared Polis, Democrat from Colorado, Aaron Earl Blumenauer, Democrat from Oregon, told Sessions that they encourage you to proceed with rapidity on the DEA's permitting process, and we believe it is in keeping with the President Trump's campaign promises in the best interests of the American people. Lawmakers cite marijuana's potential to ease the symptoms of PTSD, which has affected many of the heroic men and women of our armed forces. They write, as well as other conditions. Quote, the cumbersome and lengthy permitting process, as well as the difficulty of obtaining different types of strains of cannabis with which to perform research, have thwarted researchers' ability to study the pharmacology and potential medical usage of cannabis, the lawmakers said. The DEA's new permitting process of August 2016 does not attempt to change marijuana laws except for the acquisition of research material. Such a change is small, but will greatly enhance scientists' ability to perform research, and as such, it should not be hindered unnecessarily. And yeah, they want to be able to grow this stuff where people are like, okay, we need a good sativa that has, orange and mint, because that's what works best for certain kinds of PTSD. I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't really know what I'm talking about with all that I just said, but it sounds good. But basically, that's the kind of shit they want to do. And they can't, because the weed you get through the DEA grown at this Ole Miss grow op at this college in Mississippi by this same guy that's been growing it since 1968 and divvied out to you by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, it looks like shit. Who knows if it's sativa or indica or what? It looks more like parsley and oregano. But, what they expect that you're going to do with it is you're going to extract the THC out of it and use that in all your tests. Well, I'm afraid that that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about fucking cannabis. Cannabis is, something that the person with PTSD develops a relationship with, just like somebody on opioids develops a relationship with those. You're not going to do that with oregano looking shit or the extracted THC from it. Anyway, ending with an appeal to Sessions' affinity for law and order, they write, finally, because we know you to be a man of unwavering commitment to the rule of law, we asked with respect for the DEA's rule to be followed and for the permitting process to move forward with all possible expeditiousness. There's the actual letter. Again, this was written by Tom Angel. And we have the American Legion, another big story, weighing in on whether or not the veterans can, should be able to use medical marijuana. And this is veterans within the states of legalized medical marijuana. Man, that's terrible, because there is still a few states, believe it or not, a lot of them, where medical marijuana is not really legal. Even if it is legal, it's still shady as fuck, or, it ain't exactly like what these guys need for PTSD or to avoid being on opioids. Anyway, let me read this. And I could have got this from any source I wanted, really. Everybody wrote about this. But we're going to go with military.com for some reason. The American Legion adopted a resolution Thursday urging the federal government to allow the Department of Veterans Affairs doctors to discuss and recommend medical marijuana in states where it's legal, adding to the group's efforts to get cannabis in the hands of veterans. It could help. Full disclosure, I am a veteran, and I do use medical marijuana, and because of that, I can't even go to the VA hospital anymore. And I don't really need to, as much as if I was on their medication still, or got the surgery they wanted me to get, who knows where I'd be right now. And that's what the pharmaceutical industry hates to hear right there. The resolution passed at the group's national convention in Reno, Nevada, was authored by American Legion member Rob Ryan of Blue Ash, Ohio. According to the National Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Ohio has the fourth highest rate of overdose deaths in the nation, behind West Virginia, New Hampshire, and Kentucky. All states that have shitty marijuana laws, if not, none at all. New Hampshire just finally decriminalized. Anyway, it's also one of the 29 states that permit some form of cannabis use. Ryan said he's heard from veterans over and over again who use marijuana as an alternative to addictive opioids. Quote, our state congressman, when the American Legion says something, they listen. Hopefully this will have the same impact at the federal level, Ryan said. People should not be afraid to go to their doctors and talk honestly. That is true. Ryan shepherded the resolution through his local American Legion post and then took it to the county, district, and state level before it was discussed in Reno this week. Sue Sisley, a psychiatrist studying marijuana's effects on veterans with PTSD, called it a game changer. The American Legion represents 2 million veterans nationwide. I've heard more like 2.5. As President Donald Trump spoke Wednesday at the convention, he described the group as a very powerful organization. The American Legion's first acted in support of medical marijuana last summer when it decided to put its weight behind an effort to remove marijuana from the list of Schedule I drugs to allow for more research. Schedule I drugs include heroin, LSD, and ecstasy. Should we just get rid of Schedule I altogether? I mean, and they're designated as having no medical use. You can't really say that about any of those drugs, by the way. The group has also requested meetings with Trump with the intention to ask him to change his administration's policy on cannabis. In May, VA Secretary David Shulkin said he was open to new evidence showing marijuana could be used to treat veterans, but VA Policy implemented in 2011 prohibits its health care providers from sharing their opinions with veterans about marijuana or recommending it for medical use. Attempts in recent years to lift that prohibition have failed in Congress. For example, last year the Veterans Equal Access Measure passed the House as part of a VA appropriation bill with a vote of 233 to 189. It also passed the Senate on a vote of 89 to 9, but it was stripped out of the final legislation during negotiations to reconcile differences between the Senate and the House versions. So they basically just picked on this thing that couldn't have cost anybody any money. All it is saying, yeah, I mean, you know, if you're a veteran and you live in a state where medical marijuana is being used to treat things that you have, and you should be able to talk to your fucking doctor about it and maybe get a recommendation off that dude. All right, this July, the House Rules Committee blocked the amendments from going to the House floor for debate. That just happened. I just reported on it on a podcast a couple weeks back. However, the Senate could include the measure in a VA appropriations legislation. That is true. Okay, senators are expected to discuss the federal budget when they return in September from a month-long recess. Quote, year after year, we've never been able to pass the Veterans Equal Access Amendment, Sisley said Thursday. With the full weight of the American Legion behind the next round of legislation, I know we can finally get this approved. During conversation on Wednesday, 5 American Legion members from Alabama and 2 from New Mexico went to Sisley and Nevada Botanical Science, a cannabis cultivation site located in an industrial park just north of Reno. They toured 3 grow rooms, each holding hundreds of marijuana plants at various stages of development, and a lab where marijuana is concentrated into a substance that can be used in vaporized pens. The veterans watched as staff took a typical dose from a vaporizer pen. Army veteran Donna Stacy, the state commander for the Alabama American Legion, said she wanted to know more because of the resolution. As a leader of for her state, Stacy expected to talk with her congressman about the American Legion's priorities, including medical marijuana. Recreational use of marijuana became legal in Nevada on July 1st. Alabama doesn't permit any form of marijuana use. Just keep that in mind at all times. Pretty good story. Ben Carson. Old Sleepy Ben, I called him back in the day when he was running for president last go around. He was talking with the Native American Housing Association, and for some reason he just decided to start talking about weed. And Ben Carson, he's had a lot of zingers over the years. But here we go with a couple. Quote, as a doctor, few things break my heart more than to hear of families torn down and torn apart by substances which damage bodies and minds. Carson said, according to the Flathead Beacon. Quote, I'm not at all that enthusiastic about marijuana, because there have been numerous studies that show exposing a developing brain to marijuana can lead to lower IQs. Oh, God. The old marijuana makes you stupid maneuver. Well, it don't. As this article points out, and this was written by Maureen Meehan. No, there have not been. In fact, there have been numerous studies that confirm just the opposite. And if we all remember correctly, there was a study that the government used to use back in the day. You know, this might have been like back in the 70s and 80s. I remember when I was a kid, it was still fresh on everyone's mind. And then finally, we get the Freedom of Information finally came out on it. Yeah, they were basically suffocating monkeys. That's how they got you to believe that marijuana killed brain cells. Making monkeys smoke like 30,000 joints a day. Hook them up to breathing apparatuses and just shoot almost 100% cannabis smoke right into their fucking heads. Some bullshit, people. By the way, real quick, side note. If anybody was wondering how I'm doing after this fucking robbery bullshit. It's really rocky. I paid my electricity bill for August. August is almost over again. Again. We're almost in September. Things are coming back online. We're almost back on track. A couple more bills to pay to get over the hump. I should be okay. How'd I do it? Well, there was a lot of contributions that came in on the GoFundMe, even a couple from people that watch the channel and maybe know me otherwise. Thank you very much for your contributions. And I also, my patients have been more, they've been more helpful in this situation than I thought they would be or expected them to be, or even thought that they had the means to be, for that matter. And then, quite frankly, I've been selling stuff that I own, which ain't much. I don't have a whole lot of fucking things to sell. I don't have really anything, to be honest. I live kind of light, always ready to travel. But yeah, selling a couple of things that I had. They're utility type items that I might not have needed so much. And borrowed it. I borrowed a lot of money so far. I'm almost at the $1,000 mark on borrowing money. I'm sure I'm going to go past that before it's all said and done. And yeah, that's about it. Again, everybody that helped me through this shit, thank you. And everybody that's bearing with me. To be honest, the depression is still there. You know, I'm still feeling really depressed about what happened. I'm feeling depressed about the situation I'm in and having all these money problems, obviously. But I'm getting through it and continuing to do things like this. And quite frankly, you know, growing is a very therapeutic in itself. So there you have it. And yeah, I've thought about this show too. You know, like, what am I even doing here? I don't know, you know. I'm sure I've said it before that if police watch my show or whatever, they're trying to find out about me. This is all on the public airwaves. Anybody can watch this shit. And I don't feel like I have a real negative relationship with the police. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like, you know, as long as they're just doing their job and it ain't some kind of thing where, well, we're going to focus on this guy because obviously with Michigan's marijuana law, I'm sure, as I've said on the show, they can just kick your fucking door in, send you off to the judge to deal with it, you know, as you go. It's got very little to do with whether or not you actually follow the law to the letter. We've seen people getting busted following the law to the letter. We've seen people getting busted that were just doing one little thing wrong, and boom, they got felonies coming down on them. So, yeah, I'm really nervous at times that maybe I'm speaking to power and power can shut me the fuck up anytime they want. So, yeah, I could do a million other YouTube channels. I probably should just do something that could make some money, you know. Not that you can make it on YouTube anymore, and that's another thing. You know, I've been doing this show for over a year now, and I only barely got 1,000 subscribers. I don't even got 1,000 subscribers yet. What the fuck? I don't know. Maybe my personality might not be the ultimate, like, cool, badass motherfucker shit or whatever. But come on, man. Like, I don't know. There's nobody that's doing this kind of show. There's people that do these kind of shows, but it's like the only person doing news, he's doing news, and that's Russ. He has his way of doing rants, and he's talking about this shit just like I am, from the heart, and he's been an activist for a long time. So there's, like I always have said, there's Radical Russ, and there's Kyle Kalinske. It's not even his shtick, but every time a significant story comes up, he seems to have a fucking clip for it, and he's on point with his commentary as far as I'm concerned. You don't even need me if you watched his clips. So I don't know what I'm bringing to the table, but I feel like I'm doing this shit. I'll probably give this a little bit more of a chance because I don't know if I want to do something bigger. If I do, it's not going to be this channel. If I do something bigger, I probably will still do these videos for this channel too once in a while, or at least a weekly show here and there. Because this is like, I don't know, it's my outlet. I always wanted to write for High Times, but I never got to really get to the point where I'm actually writing. And now I'm looking at myself and I'm like, fuck, you're too old to do that shit. So I guess commentary is something I feel comfortable doing. And I guess that's all I got to say about all that shit. And basically, as I sidetracked off of this Ben Carson shit, that's really all I had to say about him. And we do have one more quote from him. Quote, we already have enough people with a low IQ and we don't need any more. We have enough people with a low IQ. I'm sure he's not talking about the fact that if you smoke marijuana, you're just going to have a low IQ. That's ridiculous. But we don't expect much out of Ben Carson. Just try to stay awake, Ben. I don't know what that is. Is it the pills or something? Okay, so Congress is about to decide on the state protections for marijuana again, and these are all amendments that are going to be in the up-and-coming budget for 2018. So the House Rules Committee announced earlier this month that Republican leaders intend to bring a combined appropriation bill covering various federal departments to the floor in September, and there could be opportunities to vote on extending the medical cannabis protections as well as several other marijuana riders. That's if the Republican leaders allow the amendments to even be considered, and there's a reason to be concerned that they might not, whereas spending bills have in recent years been brought to the floor under the rules that allow votes on almost any germane amendment. House Republicans last year began locking down the process after controversy surrounding riders concerning gun policy and the right of transgender people to access public bathrooms threatened the passage of some bills. And so last month, the Rules Committee blocked a measure to allow military veterans to receive medical cannabis recommendations through the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs doctors from being voted on by the full House, even though it had bipartisan support, and similar measure was approved there by a vote of 233 to 189 in 2016, as I mentioned earlier. Meanwhile, the Senate Appropriations Committee voted last month to attach the veterans language in its version of the VA bill by a margin of 24 to 7. And as you just heard, the American Legion put out their 2 cents on the issue. So in a letter first reported by Massroots, U.S. Attorney Jeff Sessions asked Congress earlier this year to not renew the state medical cannabis protections, but the Senate spending panel ignored the request, opting to attach the language to the Justice Department's 2018 spending bill with a bipartisan voice vote. And that was a huge victory when that happened. So but when that happened, it wasn't really a victory. It was just saying, hey, that rejected Mr. Sessions, and now we're right about we're on the precipice of this victory. So hopefully it is a victory, and these amendments do actually get a vote at least, because all of them will probably pass. Especially, you're going to hear some of this shit. You're going to say, yeah, how can that not pass? This is a whole different era. It used to be politicians were afraid to touch any cannabis issue with a 10-foot pole. They didn't want their name anywhere near marijuana issues. Didn't want to have any say on voting for it, especially positively. So, yeah. So now with a huge bill covering spending for the Department of Justice and other federal departments coming to the House floor next month, marijuana policy reform supporters in that chamber will have a chance to push for votes on the medical cannabis rider and other marijuana-related amendments. Here are some of the cannabis amendments that could be voted on in the House next month if they're not blocked by leadership. I'm just going to brush these up real quick because the next article basically is that. The ones that got in. Yeah, we're not going to read these, but even without House votes on the same or all of the marijuana measures, advocates are still hopeful of enacting some of them into law because of their success getting the riders approved at the Senate committee level. Specifically, they believe that they have a good chance of getting cannabis language cleared by the House Senate Conference Committee that will merge the two chambers' bills together into a single proposal to be sent to the President. In the meantime, because it could take time to form bipartisan deals needed to advance remaining House and Senate floor action on the spending bills, it is likely that the congressional leaders will first move a short-term extension of current funding levels and policy riders, such as the medical cannabis protections, in order to give themselves more time to craft the final fiscal year 18 bill. The extension would likely continue the medical cannabis language, like the Cole Memo, and other existing policy riders, like the Raurenbacher Amendment, I think the Leahy thing, and current funding levels through the end of the year. Amendments for the large appropriations bill are due at the House Rules Committee by this Friday at 10 a.m. And another reason this is a big fucking deal is this is the first year of all this Republican, like, runs everything shit, right? So this is year one of that. Like, and as you just seen, these fucking appropriations bill, this is what the government, like, they're put together this package of shit where they're like, okay, this is what we absolutely have to spend money on. We might not even get the money to spend it on all this shit, but this is what we got to spend it on. And it's a tight fucking belt, you know. It's the bootstraps pulled all the way up. Remember the sequester or whatever? That shit's still kind of a thing. There's still a lot of people that ain't getting money from that. That was a long fucking time ago. But bottom line is yeah, you had all that shit happened over some Bush tax cuts back in the day. Now you're having shit like Trump talking about, well, I'm going to shut the government down. We're going to not vote for a debt ceiling increase and, you know, shut the government down unless you give us money for the wall. Like, where the fuck's that coming from? You might as well call that one of the riders. Like, make an amendment saying you either get money for marijuana spending or money for your fucking wall. Which one do you want? So let's look at some of these amendments. Here are the and this is all Tom Angel again, like the last one. Here are the marijuana amendments Congress could vote on soon. Congress will consider a large federal spending bill in September, and a number of lawmakers are working to attach marijuana amendments to it. Now, this will be bullshit if this don't happen, because I remember when Obama had both chambers like locked up, it was all Democrat. Man, Republicans were slipping in shit every time something passed. There was some kind of thing on it that almost like almost nullified the thing it was attached to sometimes. Other times it was just completely unrelated, but it was some bullshit you would have never wanted to see pass. But you had to let that go if it was going to be something else. So this is completely like bipartisan. All this shit is bipartisan. Every fucking one of them. And if not, some of them have huge majorities of, you know, one house or the other that are for these amendments. And these amendments have been passing. Some of them have been attached before to these appropriations bills, and they've been successful at passing no problem with big numbers. So, same thing. So this is a first look at these proposals, many of which appear likely to pass if House Republican leadership don't stop them from being considered. you have the Protect State Medical Cannabis Laws, which means none of the funds made available under this act to the Department of Justice may be used in respect to any of the states, and it lists all the states. When I say that, there's an asterisk on there because there's always something where they don't include a state, or there's a state that isn't even medical marijuana yet, but they include it anyway. So I don't know. I'll just recommend that you go and read this article by Tom Angel if you want to know the exact states that are in these amendments. I'm not going to read the list every time. So anyway, there's the sponsors. They're going to be the same almost every time. You're going to always have Dana Rohrabacher, Earl Blumenauer, and then you have Jared Polis, and then you also have Don Young. That's a Republican from Arkansas. There's Tom McClintock, Republican from California. Barbara Lee, David Joyce, Republican from Ohio. Steve Cohen, Democrat from Tennessee, which is almost like saying a Republican. I don't really know, though, because I don't know much about him. But Matt Gaetz, Republican, Florida. So, like I said, this is totally bipartisan. And this is to say in states like I just named off, like Tennessee, Ohio didn't really have that good of laws until now. Recently, they have a medical marijuana. Arkansas, same thing. Their medical marijuana programs are anywhere near up and running. Nowhere is near it, rather. But anyway, that was just a snapshot to let you know that this shit's all bipartisan, man. All this shit. And so that was the state medical marijuana, and then you have protecting state marijuana legalization laws. So the next one's basically the same as the last one, only we're talking about none of the funds will be available to the Department of Justice. To prevent them from implementing their own laws that authorize the use, distribution, possession, cultivation of marijuana on non-federal lands within their respective jurisdictions. So that one is regular marijuana, not medical marijuana, not recreational marijuana. It didn't specify any kind of thing. It just said marijuana. So again, the list of states, I'm not going to read it, but it's, as you can see, clearly it's not as big as this list up here. There's something missing in there. What is it? Well, Michigan's in there. See, the thing is by 2018, there might be some other states that are toying around with the idea of legalizing marijuana. And that's what this list is a testimony of. And again, I'm not going to read it. And then this time I'm not going to read this either, but there's a couple other people that are in here. It's not the exact same list of sponsors. And quite frankly, it's just as bipartisan as the other one. Protecting state CBD laws. None of the funds made available by the Act may be used to prevent a state from implementing any law that makes it lawful to possess, distribute, or use cannabidiol or cannabidiol oil. Letting Washington, D.C. legalize and regulate marijuana sales. They're just going to add this thing in page 507, line 23, insert federal after no. Whatever that little thing does, it makes it so that they can actually start selling weed and set up some kind of regulated marketplace for that in D.C., where it's been legal for a while now. But guess what? You can only just give it away. You can't, like, buy and sell it. Permitting marijuana businesses to access banks. None of the funds made available under this act may be used with respect to the state of all these people. To prohibit or penalize a financial institution from providing financial services to an entity solely because the entity is a manufacturer, producer, or person that participates in any business or organized activity that is involved in handling marijuana or marijuana products and engages in such activity pursuant to a law established by a state or a local unit of local government. So that basically says that the budget will not afford anybody any money to penalize a bank for doing business with a marijuana business. That's just, it still basically doesn't force the bank's hand. You know what I mean? That doesn't say that the bank has to do business with somebody. Permitting marijuana business to access banks. None of the funds made available under this act may be used to modify the guidance issued by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network titled BSA Expectations. So they're basically taking the muscle out of the actual law that gives the federal authorities power to prosecute you for, you know, using money with marijuana-related businesses. So they're saying, like, that's another thing that's kind of like a protection for banks if they do decide to do business with somebody with marijuana money. And then there's another one. None of the funds made available in this act may be used to revoke the guidance issued by the Financial Crimes Enforcement. Anyway, expanding marijuana research. None of the funds made available may be used to pay the salaries or expenses of personnel to fail to act on any application. This is going to penalize somebody like Jeff Sessions for not letting somebody grow some research weed that put in an application. You can't sit on the application, man. It's just not how things work. And then we have expanding marijuana research. And it's again about the applications submitted to the Attorney General. I mean, it's like, hey, by the way, Attorney General, this should apply to him too. Protecting state hemp programs, no money should be made available to prevent states from implementing its own state laws that authorize the use, distribution, possession, or cultivation of industrial hemp as defined in the 2014 Agricultural Act, Section 7606. Moving money away from the DEA, marijuana eradication, towards child abuse victims. Well, and deficit reduction. So basically, instead of reappropriating the DEA, the $20 billion or whatever, I don't even know what they get anymore, but 22, 23, $25 billion a year. For what? Well, anyway, this is chipping away at it. And here they're going to start chipping away at it with, what is this here? Oh yeah, child abuse victims and deficit reduction. And basically they're taking like a 9 million here, 4 million there, 4 million there, 3 million, 2 million. And then this is going to illustrate that, yeah, if you want to, this is the budget that the federal government has to work with. This is what we're spending money on. Do we really want to spend money on this, or do we want to spend money on that? Do we want to spend it on rape kits? There's $8 million that you can spend on getting rape kits tested. Then there's this other thing where they're trying to block suspension of driver's license for drug offenses. And that, basically drug users or addicts are already criminalized in so many ways. And it's like, it makes, if nothing else, it makes them a burden on society or a burden on the people around them. Especially when all of a sudden you lose your driver's license just because you got caught possessing marijuana or some shit, let's just say. Just to make it so you people that really like to see people get locked up in cages are like, well, he did have a fucking ounce of heroin. He should go to jail forever. You know, that's another thing in this prohibition. People on the marijuana side are quick as fuck to be like, man, they should go after the meth and the heroin dealers and stuff. I mean, they should go after the people that legitimized this drug war and shut this down. You know, like what? When has it ever been a thing where a prohibition sounds like an American constitutionally sound policy? Come on. Well, we're not going to look at the other amendments which increase funding for drug treatment and interdiction as a response to the opioid overdoses and the opioid crisis, but I did see one where it said something about spending more money on getting Narcan, you know, to police stations rather than giving the DEA a bunch of money to enforce marijuana laws. So that's kind of what they're doing. They're making clever little amendments that if you vote against it, you're going to look like a real asshole. So, yeah, and then there's other ones that are just popular because of what they are. They're protections for people that are doing things in that marijuana experiment that's so far so good. If it wasn't good, then people wouldn't be trying to protect it so much, like attorney generals and governors in states where it's happening at. Would they? They'd let Jeff Sessions come right on in there and shut it down right now. But instead, you see the opposite. Even the fucking police in, like, Oregon are writing letters to him saying, hey, man, you took a leaked report. You're full of shit. This isn't, you know, our program ain't running like you say it is. So, trying to step away from the Sessions constant talking about him, but here we go with another weird story. White House anti-drug officials or office is asking Massachusetts and other medical marijuana states for some data. That's always weird. An arm of the White House's anti-drug office has asked Massachusetts and several other states where medical marijuana is legal to turn over information about registered patients, triggering a debate over patients' rights and whether state officials should cooperate with federal administration that appears hostile towards the drug. Dale Quigley, deputy coordinator of the National Marijuana Initiative, or NMI, has asked Massachusetts health officials for data on age, gender, and medical condition of the state's approximately 40,000 registered medical marijuana patients. Quigley is a former police officer in Colorado with a long history of speaking out against legalization. And remember, earlier I said something about Sessions' secretive little committee on marijuana that, you know, that he basically has out there, like fingers feeling out like what could be going on out there. This guy seems like he's part of that, and of course he is. What is this National Marijuana Initiative? No one's ever heard of that before. Anyway, the NMI is part of the Federal High-Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Initiative, a law enforcement effort directed by the White House's Office of National Drug Control Policy. In an interview, Quigley said the data are for a routine research project in which he is looking for any correlation between how strictly states regulate medical cannabis and the rates of marijuana use among different age groups within the general public in those states, which is data he can get from other places if he wanted to. He insisted that he is not seeking to identify patients and that his work doesn't signal immediate or imminent changes to current hands-off approach by federal government or state-regulated medical marijuana operations. Quote, there are no black helicopters warming up in the bullpen, Quigley said. I have no idea where this is going to take us yet. And maybe it is just them trying to do some marketing research to see how much billions of dollars they can make off this medical marijuana shit once they hand it over to all their buddies. The medical marijuana proponents said that there's more notion that the Trump administration is nosing around medical marijuana could scare off patients, sending them to the black market for cannabis instead of registering with the state-run systems that ensure medicines are tested for potency and safety. Patients do not consent to their data being used by the National Marijuana Initiative, they said, and can't be sure their personal information was kept private. Quote, we must protect patients' anonymity and comfort in obtaining medical cannabis without the feeling like they're being watched, said Beth Collins, Senior Director of Government Relations and External Affairs at Americans for Safe Access, a national medical marijuana advocacy group. Quote, they'll see this story and say, oh, the feds are going to know I'm a patient and stay away. It's an access issue. Some patients have rare ailments, and DPH officials are concerned it may be possible to use that data to identify them. Quote, protecting patients' privacy is a major consideration of our continued review, a DPH spokesman said in a statement. Massachusetts law prohibits DPH from disclosing and identifying information about registered patients in most cases. The leaders of the Massachusetts Patients Advocacy Alliance, which sponsored the 2012 ballot measure legalizing medical cannabis in the state, said changes over time to the state's registration process mean the data sought by Quigley will be incomplete. Quote, there is a potential for incredible studies by real medical researchers, said Nicole Snow, the group's executive director, but we want that data to be credible and accurate and also confidential. I think the patients of Massachusetts would feel this is an intrusion. Of course they would. From now, the U.S. Department of Justice is operating under congressional restraints on an Obama-era edict that essentially prohibits federal law enforcement actions against state-regulated medical marijuana operations that don't contribute to the interstate trafficking or public health and safety problems. Trump's Attorney General, former U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions, is a longtime anti-drug hardliner. He has sought to remove constraints on marijuana investigations and recently sparred with governors of legal marijuana states who said he used flawed and outdated data to argue that legalization has caused a spike in emergency room admissions and drug trafficking. Let's not forget, he also opened Pandora's box on police search and seizures. The agency that Quigley works for reports directly to the White House, not to Sessions, but advocates worry that the data Quigley is collecting could eventually be used or misconstrued by U.S. officials to help build a case for the crackdown. You know, the crackdown, this big old crackdown that's supposed to happen. And they also question his qualifications and motivations, noting that his expertise is in law enforcement, not research or statistics, and that he has given talks around the country decrying marijuana legalization. He's obviously biased, Collins said, and if research isn't done right, it can show whatever he wants it to show. Why isn't a researcher doing this? There's a red flag to me right away. Moreover, various state medical marijuana programs have existed for different lengths of time and collect different levels of types of data. That, Collins and others said, would make it difficult for even a sophisticated researcher to reconcile the numbers and produce a valid apples-to-apples comparison. Quigley himself acknowledged he is skeptical of loosening prohibitions on marijuana. Quote, I've not seen good outcome of legalization. I've not seen much good come out of legalization. When you make something that has no sense of risk or harm attached to it widely available, use rates are going to go up. What? That doesn't even make sense, dude. When you make something that has no sense of risk or harm attached to it widely available, like broccoli don't have nothing harmful attached to it. It's actually good for you. Make that widely available. Think use rates are going to go up? Maybe a little bit. Not too much. Come on, man. But anyway, dude, Quigley, use rates have not gone up. And you guys are still doing a pretty good job of beating it into people's heads that there is harm attached to it. So why are you saying all of a sudden that there's no risk or harm attached to it? Is that a concession? Did I just see you concede that fucking marijuana is completely harmless, Quigley? all the naysayers, especially Kevin Sabat, hey man, fuck off. Colorado, again, keeps its tax promise, funding 2 new mental health clinics. Colorado's Office of Behavioral Health announced this week that Frisco and Montrose will both receive funding for new mental health facilities serving the western slope. Sounds like a ski resort. Senate bill signed into law by Governor Hickenlooper in May set aside millions in marijuana tax dollars for upgrades to Colorado's mental health system and to help curtail the use of jails to house those in crisis who have not been charged with a crime. Deficiency in rural facilities was specifically targeted in the bill, which set aside nearly $2 million over 2 years to expand services. All the money was initially earmarked for an 8-bed crisis stabilization unit and its operation in Montrose, but through maneuvering and negotiations, Summit County will now receive half of that bankroll. But as early as next spring, Frisco Medical Office Building will be the site of a 4 to 6 bed walk-in crisis unit, and Montrose will build a 4-bed unit as its own location is already under construction. And that's awesome. So, by the way, monthly marijuana sales of $100 million is the new norm in Colorado. And let's just say that the naysayers like Chris Christie and all those other places where that's blood money. You're whatever. Yeah, I know it's not enough. Your holes in your budget are way too big for you to justify it. But at least things are happening. Now this article popped up again all over the place because from time to time you'll see the National Institute on Health or the National Cancer Institute talk about cannabis being something good for cancer. So let's check this latest one out. National Cancer Institute lists cannabis as potential cancer treatment. Cannabinoids may be able to kill cancer cells while protecting normal cells. The National Cancer Institute has updated its website to include information about several clinical studies in which cannabinoids have been shown potential to fight cancer. As the NCI is a part of the Department of Health and Human Services, this marks an acknowledgement by the federal government that cannabis does indeed have potential as medicine, yet despite this acknowledgement, cannabis is still listed as a Schedule I drug with no currently accepted medical use. The NCI page for cannabis and cannabinoids lists several promising preclinical trials that highlight this cancer-fighting potential of cannabinoids. One of these studies found that the CBD caused breast cancer cell death while having little effect on the normal breast cells. Other studies in mice with breast cancer found that cannabinoids might decrease the growth, number, and spread of tumors. The NCI also reports several more studies on mice and rats that have found that cannabinoids may inhibit tumor growth by causing cell death, blocking cell growth, and blocking the development of blood vessels needed by tumors to grow. Laboratory and animal studies have shown that cannabinoids may be able to kill cancer cells while protecting normal cells. That's a lot of shit for the National Cancer Institute to be spilling the beans on. The page notes that 2 cannabinoid-based medications, dronabinol and nabilone, have been approved by the FDA for the treatment of symptoms brought on by chemotherapy. You mean you need munchies? Another study has found that in addition to the nausea-fighting effect, CBD may make chemotherapy more effective and increase cancer cell death. Parroting that one is a little bit dangerous. I don't know if they actually have a study for this. CBD may make chemotherapy more effective and increase cancer cell death. That's just to say that it works. Of course, chemotherapy, I don't think that works. I mean, obviously it does something. It kills cells. It kills cancer cells with cancer or whatever. I don't even know. Chemotherapy, pills, and medication, to me, seem very dangerous from what I've read about them. I don't know. So now they're just like this. This is a slow fade in to say that, hey, guess what, guys? CBD makes your chemo better. And that's what they said about THC with your normal Vicodin or your normal Xanax. Oh, yeah, medical marijuana does help your other pills work better. Man, they just want to keep their pills in there somehow. We'll see. We'll see how this pans out. Additional studies on mice have found that CBD and delta-9 THC together can increase the effectiveness of chemotherapy. How about if you just take chemo right out of the loop? We'll talk about that another time. This cancer issue is a little bit close to home with me. I know a lot of people that have had it. And most of those people are dead. Pretty much all of them. And I do know some people right now that do have it. And a couple of them will not use cannabis. They refuse to. It's like, I don't know what the justification is, but whatever. When we talk about the NFL a few times here and there, all of a sudden the NBA commissioner says he's open to medical pot, whatever that is. With the states all across the nation climbing out of a pit of pot prohibition, it should come to no surprise that professional sports leagues are now, who wrote this? Mike Adams. Oh, gee. Leagues are now starting to discuss the possibility of revising their drug policies. Although the majority of the debate so far focused on how cannabis medicine might be used as an alternative to opioid medications for players in the NFL, it has recently revealed that the arena of professional basketball is too giving this treatment option some consideration. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, who has not exactly been in support of changing the NBA's drug policy with respect to marijuana, is apparently loosening his stance on the concept of players using the herb as a substitute to dangerous prescription drugs. Earlier this week, while attending a Basketball Without Borders camp in Israel, Silver was asked to clarify his position on how the NBA plans to deal with the marijuana legalization. His response, which was reported on the league's Reddit page, indicates some openness with respect to developing into therapeutic potential for cannabis plant. Quote, I would say it's something we will look at, Silver said. I'm very interested in the science when it comes to medical marijuana. Quote, my personal view is that it should be regulated in the same way that other medications are if the plan is to use it for pain management, he added. It's something that needs to be discussed with the Players Association, but to the extent that the science demonstrates that there are effective uses of medical reasons, we'll be open to it. Hopefully there's not as much pain involved in our sport as some others, so there's not as much of a need for it. Whatever. What about if it's recreationally legal, for all those people in California or whatever? For now, marijuana is prohibited in the NBA, with players being monitored to some degree through as many as 6 drug tests throughout each 1,230-game season. Unfortunately, due to the league's ultra-restrictive policy on cannabis, it is relatively easy for a player to fail a drug screen. The NBA's rule on marijuana use only allows 15 nanograms of THC per milliliter of blood. To put this in perspective, Olympic players are permitted to show 150 nanograms before encountering any disciplinary action. Last month, Silver expressed concerns over the idea of revamping the NBA's cannabis policy due to the problems that could arise for the players that get stoned on the road. Quote, I don't see the need for any changes right now, he said, according to the NBA.com. It's legal in certain states, but as you know, our players are constantly traveling, and it might be a bit of a trap to say we're going to legalize it in these states, but no, it's illegal in the other states, and have players get in a position where they are traveling with marijuana and getting in trouble. I feel ya, bro. All right, we don't have a good person that smokes weed this week, so maybe Jeff Sessions is right. But I'm just going to say this about when it comes to good people that smoke weed. Pretty much everybody in the NBA and then the NFL, and then the MLB, and all the soccer leagues, and anybody else that's in sports that uses medical marijuana or just smokes weed recreationally, if that's what they think they're doing. I just want to give a big props to all of them people, every one of you athletes, from, you had your professional Olympic athletes that basically, I mean, come on. No one can say that marijuana and sports don't mix. No one can say that. No one can say that for any reason whatsoever. And that's all I got to say about that. So they're all good people. When you want to talk about role models, people always use sports stars. They're like, oh, these are your role models. They're your positive role models or whatever. Well, I got to let you know, man, a lot of these guys do smoke weed. NBA, NFL, baseball, all of them, all the sports. Last but not least, we have Radical Russ letting you know, this is Russ Belville, letting you know that you want to boycott Roger Stone. I did mention Roger Stone on a video a couple weeks ago. How he has his little cannabis thing going, and he's trying to get you to believe that, he's going to usher in the Trump era medical marijuana legalization. He's all for it. And whatever Trump said on the campaign trail, I don't know if Stone's trying to say he's going to hold him to at least that, or he's trying to go all the way with it. But there's a bit of a boycott going on, known as Disown Stone. You can go to Twitter and look at that, and there's a lot of stuff going on with it. But basically, I kind of want to read this, but I kind of don't, because, my goodness, I would have to repeat all these terrible things that Roger Stone has said. And I don't want to get in a negative mood, but I'll just kind of leave this on a nice chunk of them, so if you want to, you can read it. It's terrible. Boycott them? Sure. Well, you know what caught my attention after reading all these horrible things that this guy is known for? The reason that this Disown Stone boycott was started because an actual black guy, African-American man who heads the Minority Cannabis Business Association, withdrew from his speaking spot at the CWCBE, the Cannabis World Congress and Business Exposition, because it was in response to Scott Giannotti telling Horton how dumb you people are, and alleged Horton was only withdrawing because of his allegiance to competitors. All-white conference. Wow. So, one of the biggest issues we are facing as we move into legalization is the phenomenon of blacks did time and whites make dimes. How people of color were disproportionately targeted and punished for marijuana sales during Prohibition, and now they're shut out of profiting from marijuana sales under legalization. As you've seen clearly with the medical marijuana in Maryland. Anyway, in that context, placing Roger Stone on a pedestal at one of the largest cannabis industry conferences is the apotheosis of Caucasian cannabis community color blindness and tone deafness. Hashtag Disown Stone. Now, what was they wanting Stone to do? I think it was something like he was going to be the keynote speaker. And I don't know. I've read this list of things, and it's just terrible. If you want to read this list of things, go to High Times, go to this article here, Radical Rant. It's not very fun to read through it. Stone, he's just a sick individual. He's a crazy guy. But, yeah. I kind of agree with the boycott as far as, I mean, him being this, like, keynote speaker or whatever. Now, I don't really think Stone should be banned from actually being at the conference. You know, everybody's got their little booth or whatever with their information pamphlets and shit. I mean, let him stand there and try to push his ideas, and people will criticize the fuck out of him. Of course someone's going to walk up to him and clown his ass out. So no, don't put this guy on a pedestal. Don't make him like some keynote speaker. That's just the move, like the, you know, he's expecting, you know, to get that kind of extra treatment like that. But don't give it to him. No quarter for Roger Stone. All right, guys. Everybody watching, thank you. I'm about to be out of here. I guess you'll see more clips coming down the line, man. Things are happening all the time. I can barely keep up with this shit and do all the stuff that I'm trying to keep up with. So thanks for watching. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Haven't recommended this shit to somebody else, give it a try. I might try to clean up my act one of these days so I can get some more subscribers, just based on the fact that I probably swear a lot. But it's really hard to picture myself getting there with this channel. I'm really just kind of like, don't want to be censored, don't want to worry about it. That's all. Everybody have a good time and be safe.